October 26, 1942. 14,000 feet over the Solomon Sea. The world was a screaming blue void, and Lieutenant J.G. Sam Thatch was trapped in its center. The G-forces mashed him into his seat, a relentless, invisible hand trying to crush his lungs. His F-4 Wildcat, dusty times, shuddered around him, a metal cage vibrating with the raw fury of its Pratt & Whitney R-1830 engine. The smell was a nauseating cocktail: high-octane exhaust, hot engine oil, the sharp, acidic tang of spent cordite, and his own fear, a coppery taste in the back of his throat. Echo leader, break right. Break right. The voice in his headset was Kowalski's, shredded by static and panic. Sam wrenched his head, scanning the hard, sun-bleached sky. Where was he? A shadow flickered over his canopy. Then another. Not shadows. Death. A 6M20s. 3 of them. Their sleek, green profiles cut through the air with a grace that was almost obscene. They moved like hawks, while his Wildcat felt like a freight car. He'd lost the rest of his flight in the initial, chaotic merge. Now he was alone. The hunt was on. Thump, thump, thump. Tracers, glowing red and green, streaked past his wingtip, so close he could hear their electric sizzle over the engine's roar. He stomped on the right rudder and hauled the stick into his gut, his body weighing 1,000 pounds. The Wildcat groaned, protesting the maneuver. Through the black spots dancing in his vision, he saw a Zero slide past his turn circle as if it were on rails, its pilot a mere glimpse of a brown helmet and dark goggles. His knuckles were white on the stick. His 6 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns felt useless. To shoot, he had to point the whole airplane, and the Zeros were never where he pointed. They were always elsewhere, already climbing, already turning, already setting up for another killing pass. Mayday, Mayday, this is Echo 2, I'm jumped. Angels 1-4, over the slot. He yelled into his microphone, but only a dry, meaningless crackle answered. The radio was dead, shot out in the first pass. He was utterly alone. Think. See the gear, not the clock. The old watchmaker's mantra surfaced through the terror. But here, there were no gears. Only chaos. He had one move left, a desperate, ugly maneuver that went against every instinct. He shoved the throttle to the firewall, nosed over into a sheer, screaming dive, aiming for a bank of cumulus clouds 5,000 feet below. The airspeed needle whipped past 300 knots. The wind shrieked through a fresh bullet hole in his canopy, a high-pitched whistle that drilled into his skull. For a glorious second, he thought he might make it. Then he saw them, reflected in his glass gun sight. 2 of the Zeros had anticipated him. They weren't following him down. They were waiting for him, cutting the cord of his dive, their wings already lining up. They had read him like a book. He was out of ideas, out of sky, out of time. He looked over his shoulder, a futile, slow-motion movement. The third Zero was there, having climbed above him. It was now diving, perfectly positioned. It filled his mirror, then his canopy. He could see the intricate red Hinomaru on the wings, the dark maws of its 2 20mm cannons in the wings and the 2 7.7mm machine guns in the nose. They began to wink, glowing with a malevolent orange light. The world narrowed to those 4 flashing points of light. The scream of the wind faded. There was only the silent, inevitable bloom of the cannons, and the certain knowledge that in a second, his world would end. Before we continue this unbelievable story of one man's ingenuity against impossible odds, make sure you're subscribed. This channel is your front row seat to untold stories of courage and sheer brilliance from the darkest chapters of history. Don't miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. The silence, before it was shattered, was a physical presence in the room. It was a dense, warm quiet, broken only by the rhythmic, metronomic ticking of 100 timepieces. The air in Elias Thatch's shop in Boise City, Oklahoma, hung heavy with the smells of brass polish, cutting oil, and the fine red dust that seeped through every crack in the window frames. To young Sam, it was the scent of order. His world was measured in millimeters and heartbeats. He sat beside his father at the broad oak workbench, its surface a landscape of tiny tools, loose gears, and disemboweled watch movements under the intense, focused eye of a green-shaded lamp. Elias Thatch was a man of few words. His conversations conducted with the gentle tick-tock of a well-regulated balance wheel. "See, Samuel," his father whispered, his voice as soft as the brush of a camel-hair tool. He pointed with the tweezers to a gear smaller than a fingernail. "The problem is never the whole clock. It is always one thing. One worn tooth. One speck of dust. One hair's breadth of misalignment. You must learn to see what others cannot." Sam learned. He learned to still his breath, to slow the frantic thumping of his own heart, until his entire universe narrowed to the single, spinning point of a balanced staff. He learned that force was the enemy of precision, that true power lay in the application of exact, calculated pressure. A gentle nudge with a screwdriver here, a microscopic adjustment of a regulator there. He applied the same philosophy to the old Springfield rifle he used for varmints behind the farm, learning to read the wind not as a gust, but as a variable, to feel the triggers break not as a jerk, but as a gradual, inevitable surrender. That ordered universe ended on a Tuesday. The memory wasn't cinematic. It was a brutal, random collision of physics. He was walking back from the general store, a bag of groceries in his arms, when he saw his father's pickup truck paused at the intersection of Main and Broadway. He saw the other vehicle, a battered Ford, approaching too fast, swerving erratically. The sounds were all wrong: the lazy buzz of a bee, the distant cry of a crow, the normal, peaceful sounds of a panhandle afternoon. Then the screech of locked brakes, a sound like time itself tearing, and the catastrophic, grinding crush of metal and glass. The bag of groceries dropped. A can of peaches rolled into the ditch. Sam was running, his heart a frantic, runaway clock in his chest. He saw his father, the man who navigated the tiny, perfect universes of clockwork, slumped over the wheel, surrounded by the shattered, chaotic wreckage of the real world. The silence that followed was different now. It was no longer peaceful. It was a void, a deafening absence where the ticking used to be. The shop was sold. The clocks were sold. The silence in the small house on the edge of town was a living thing, a constant, aching reminder. Sam, at 19, filled out the Navy enlistment papers not with patriotic fervor, but with a desperate, hollow need. He needed a new mechanism to belong to, a system larger than himself where his peculiar watchmaker's focus might find purpose. The Navy, however, was a mechanism of a different sort. It was loud, blunt, and valued aggression over accuracy. In the sweltering heat of Pensacola, he first clashed with Vincent "Jabber" Kowalski, a loud, confident kid from the Chicago stockyards. Where Sam was deliberate, Kowalski was impulsive. Where Sam calculated, Kowalski charged. "Thatch, you fly like you're afraid to get it dirty." Kowalski would jab after a training session, slapping Sam on the back too hard. "It's a fighter plane, not a pocket watch. You gotta throw it around." Sam would just shrug, the silence of his father's shop a wall between him and the world. He found a different kind of mentor in Chief Petty Officer O'Malley, a grizzled aviation machinist's mate with grease permanently etched into the lines of his hands and a calm, analytical demeanor that reminded Sam of his father. O'Malley would find Sam in the hangar after hours, running his hands over the complex machinery of an F4F Wildcats engine, tracing fuel lines and control cables. "She's a stout bird, son. Not pretty, but she's got a good heart," O'Malley said one evening, his voice a low rumble. "You see it, don't you? The others, they just see a flying machine. You see the gears." Sam looked at him, surprised. O'Malley wiped his hands on a rag. "I see how you look at it. Like your dad was a watchmaker. You see all the pieces, how they fit. Don't let him sand that out of you. In a real scrap, being the wildest dog in the fight ain't always what keeps you alive." Those words echoed in Sam's mind as he stood on the deck of the transport ship, watching the emerald-green hell of Guadalcanal rise from the sea. The heat was a suffocating blanket, thick with the smell of salt, jungle rot, and diesel fuel. It was chaos. It was the absolute antithesis of his father's quiet workshop. As he shouldered his pack and prepared to step onto the island, Chief O'Malley's final, firm handshake and parting words were the only thing that felt solid. "Remember, son, you can't outfly those zeros. So you'd better figure out how to outthink them." The air at Henderson Field didn't just feel hot, It felt like a solid, wet weight pressing down on a man, suffocating him from the inside out. As Sam Thatch stepped off the transport onto the pierced steel planking of the runway, the humidity hit him like a physical blow, soaking his khaki uniform instantly. The smells were a brutal assault, a primordial stew of rotting vegetation, churned, greasy mud, the sharp tang of aviation fuel, the faint, sickly sweet undertone of decay, and over it all, the ever-present acrid smoke from burning refuse piles. This wasn't the ordered silence of a watchmaker's shop. This was chaos given geography. Henderson Field was a raw, bleeding scar in the jungle. Marines, shirtless and glistening with sweat, toiled like ants around revetments made of sandbags and shattered coconut logs. The ragged, palm-frond camouflage nets strung over dispersal areas did little to blunt the oppressive sun. The ground, a mixture of coral and black soil, had been churned into a deep, cloying muck by recent rains and constant traffic. Every step was an effort, the mud pulling at his boots with a wet, sucking sound. And then there were the Wildcats. Parked in their makeshift revetments, they looked less like sleek warbirds and more like pugnacious, weary beasts. Their dark blue paint was scarred and chipped, stained with exhaust residue and oil. Men in grimy coveralls swarmed over them, their tools clanking, voices raised in sharp, technical calls. The air buzzed with the sound of pneumatic wrenches and the coughing, sputtering start of a Pratt & Whitney engine somewhere down the line. Sam found his assigned plane, number 12, its side stenciled with the name Dusty Times. He ran a hand over the warm, riveted skin of the fuselage. It felt solid, thick, durable. This was the Iron Beast. It was everything the Zero was not: heavy, straightforward, unglamorous. It was a sledgehammer to the Zero's razor-sharp katana. "Not much to look at, is she?" Sam turned. Lieutenant J.G. Vince Kowalski stood there, helmet already in hand, a cynical smirk on his face. His own plane, Windy City Bruiser, was parked nearby. "She's stout," Sam replied, his voice quiet. "Stout." Kowalski barked a laugh. "Thatch, they're calling them wild catfishes now. You hit the water, and this thing sinks like a stone. That Jap Zero, it glides. Glides. How is that fair?" He shook his head, the bravado from Pensacola now tinged with a raw, frayed edge. "I got bounced 2 days ago. 2 of 'em. I did everything by the book. Standard turn, full throttle. They were still inside me like I was standing still. I only got out because their cannon jammed. Pure luck." The briefing that evening was held in a stifling, sandbagged tent, lit by a single flickering lantern that threw long, dancing shadows. The intelligence officer, a haggard Marine captain, stood before a chalkboard map of the slot. "Gentlemen, the enemy aircraft you are facing is the Mitsubishi A6M2 Type 0, codenamed Zeke," the captain began, his voice flat with exhaustion. "Weight's about 2,000 pounds less than your F-4F. Its wing loading is significantly lower. What that means in the air is it can climb at nearly 3,000 feet per minute to your 2,000. It can turn inside you at any speed. Its armament includes 2 20mm cannons that will shred you, and 2 7.7mm machine guns." A grim silence settled over the pilots. Sam watched a moth circle the lantern, its movements frantic, unpredictable. "Your advantages," the captain continued, tapping the chalk on the board, "are armor plate, self-sealing fuel tanks, and sheer ruggedness. You can take a hit and keep flying. He often cannot. You have a better high-speed dive. And your 6.50 calories pack a punch if you can connect." He looked around the tent, his eyes meeting each of theirs. "Do not try to turn with a Zero. Do not get slow. You see one, you make a pass, you use your diving speed to disengage, and you reset. This isn't a dogfight. It's a hit and run. Your job is to break up their formations, protect the field and our ships. Survival is a victory." As they filed out of the tent into the humid, mosquito-ridden darkness, Kowalski fell into step beside Sam. "Hit and run. He makes it sound so easy. Like we're just swatting flies." He lit a cigarette, the match flaring briefly in the dark, illuminating the tension around his eyes. "They're not flies, Thatch. They're goddamn hornets." Suddenly, the air was torn apart. Not by an engine, but by a shrill, rising and falling wail that cut through the jungle night and froze the blood in their veins. It was the air raid siren. From the direction of the radar shack, a voice screamed into the night, raw with urgency. Bogies. 50 plus. Angels 20. They're coming down the slot. The ordered world was gone. The chaos was here. The world dissolved into a screaming, violent kaleidoscope. One moment, the 6 Wildcats of Sam's flight were climbing in a tight V formation through a breathtakingly beautiful sky, the sun glinting off their canopies, the deep blue of the Pacific stretching to infinity below. The next, the sky was full of enemies. They came from the sun, a swarm of sleek, green specks that rapidly grew into the deadly profiles of A6M0s. The radio, which had been silent except for the drone of their engines, exploded into a cacophony of strained voices. Tally-ho! Bandits, 10 o'clock high. Echo flight, break left. Break left. He's on my tail. Somebody get this bastard off me. Sam's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the orchestrated chaos. He slammed the throttle forward, his eyes scanning, always scanning. A 0 flashed past his nose, so close he could see the rivets on its wings. He instinctively jerked the stick to fire, but the enemy was already gone, having pulled a turn so tight it seemed to defy physics. God damn it, Thatch, where are you? Kowalski's voice screamed in his headset. Sam saw him then, a lone wildcat with 2 zeros glued to its tail, tracers stitching the air around it. Sam nosed over into a shallow dive, building speed, then pulled back hard, trying to get a deflection shot on one of the zeros. For a second, the pipper of his gun sight floated ahead of the enemy fighter. He squeezed the trigger. The 6 Brownings roared, a sound like tearing canvas, the entire airframe shuddering with the recoil. Tracers reached out, and passed harmlessly behind the zero's tail. It had simply rolled away and climbed, untouched. It was like trying to swat ghosts. Sam broke hard, the G-force pressing him down, his vision tunneling. He could feel the Wildcat straining, its wings groaning under the stress. A 0 latched onto his tail. He could feel it more than see it, a presence, a shadow of death. He jinked left, then right, but the pursuit remained relentless. Tracers zipped past his canopy. One round slammed into his right wing root with a loud metallic crunch. The plane jerked. I'm hit. Echo 2, I'm hit, he transmitted, his voice tighter than he would have liked. He went into a hard, diving spiral, using the Wildcat's one true advantage: weight. He let gravity take him, the airspeed needle vibrating past 350 knots. The 0 followed, but less eagerly now. The heavier American plane could dive away from danger, a small, fleeting mercy. He leveled out just above the wave tops, skimming the whitecaps, his engine screaming. The 0 had broken off. His breath came in ragged gasps. The smell of cordite, hot metal, and his own cold sweat filled the cockpit. He checked his gauges. The hit hadn't taken out anything critical, but a jagged hole the size of his fist was visible in his wing. He was alive. For now. But his watchmaker's mind was already working, detaching from the fear, analyzing the chaos. As he had spiraled down, his eyes, trained to see the single worn tooth, had not just been looking for an escape. They had been watching the zeros. He'd seen one, pursuing Kowalski, perform a stunning high-speed roll to reverse direction. It was a move no Wildcat could ever hope to mimic. But Sam had seen something else. For a fraction of a second, at the very apex of that roll, at extremely high speed, the zero's ailerons had seemed to hesitate. The roll wasn't perfectly fluid. It was as if, for just an instant, the controls had frozen, the sleek plane fighting its own physics. It was a flaw. A tiny, almost imperceptible flaw. A single worn tooth in the otherwise perfect, terrifying gearwork of the Japanese fighter. It was there. He was sure of it. A moment of vulnerability, a stutter in their grace. But how could he possibly exploit it? To do so, he'd have to be in a very specific, very dangerous position, and he'd have to know exactly when that moment was coming. It was a puzzle with no obvious solution. He climbed back towards the fight, his mind racing, the image of that momentary hesitation playing over and over in his head. The battle was winding down, the remaining Zeros breaking off to return to their carriers. The Wildcats, low on fuel and ammunition, turned for home. Back on the ground at Henderson, the adrenaline seeped away, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion. He stood on the pierced steel planking, staring at the bullet hole in his wing. Mechanics were already assessing the damage. The other pilots were clumping together, their voices a low, grim murmur. Kowalski walked over, his face pale beneath the grime. "That was a butcher's bill," Kowalski said quietly, all his earlier bravado gone. "We lost Sanders and Jenkins. Peterson's missing. They flew circles around us, Thatch. Goddamn circles." Sam didn't answer. He just kept staring at the hole in his wing, his mind's eye seeing not the damage, but the fleeting, critical stutter in a Zero's roll. The problem wasn't the whole dogfight. It was that one specific moment. A crazy, terrifying, and utterly brilliant idea began to form in the quiet, ordered workshop of his mind. What if they stopped trying to outfly the Zero altogether? What if they didn't turn? The mood in the mechanic's lean-to was funereal. Rain had begun to fall, a steady percussive drumming on the corrugated iron roof that matched the hollow feeling in Sam's chest. The 5 remaining pilots of the flight sat on empty fuel drums and crates of .50 caliber ammunition, their faces gaunt in the flickering light of a single hurricane lamp. The smells of wet canvas, damp earth, and cigarette smoke clung to the air, thick and suffocating. Kowalski broke the silence, his voice a low growl. "So that's it? We're just targets up there. Flying coffins." He gestured vaguely toward the airfield where the battered Wildcats Saturday. The briefing was a lie. You can't hit and run when they're already inside your turn before you can even blink. All eyes turned to Sam. He had been quiet, staring at the packed dirt floor as if the answers were written there. He could feel the weight of their expectation, the desperate hope that someone, anyone, had an idea. "They have a flaw," Sam said, his voice quiet but cutting through the rain's rhythm. Kowalski snorted. "A flaw? They're perfect, Thatch. That's the whole goddamn problem." "No machine is perfect," Sam replied, looking up. His eyes, in the lamplight, had the same focused intensity they held when peering into a watch movement. "My father taught me that. There's always a worn tooth. I saw it today." He stood, picking up a stray screwdriver from a workbench. He knelt in the dirt, the other pilots leaning forward unconsciously. With the tool's tip, he began to sketch. Not fancy aeronautical diagrams, but simple, brutalist shapes. A rough circle for a Wildcat. A longer, sleeker shape for a Zero. "We've been trying to fight them in their sky," Sam began. "On their terms. We try to turn, they turn tighter. We try to climb, they climb faster. We're playing their game, and we're losing." He pointed the screwdriver at the Wildcat shape. "What are we? We're tough. We have firepower. 6.50 calories that can chop a plane in half." He then pointed at the Zero. "What are they? They're agile. Fragile. Their wings are like paper if you can hit them." He looked around at the faces watching him, their skepticism palpable. "So, we stop turning. We stop playing their game." He drew a straight line in the dirt from the Wildcat. "This is the bait. One of us. We fly straight and level. Not fast, not slow. Predictable. Clumsy. Like a wounded bird." He then drew a second Wildcat, high and off to the side of the line. "This is the hammer. The rest of us, stacked in altitude, waiting." Now he drew the Zero, diving on the bait plane. "He'll take it." His instinct, his training, everything tells him this is an easy kill. He'll come in fast, from the rear. He's confident. He's arrogant. He expects you to break. But you don't. Sam's voice was low, intense. "You hold your course. You let him get close. You make him commit." He then dragged the screwdriver through the dirt, illustrating the Zero's inevitable reaction. "He can't just fly straight behind you. He's too fast. He'll overshoot. So he'll do what he always does. He'll roll. A quick, high-speed roll to reposition for another shot. Sam tapped the dirt right where the Zero's wing would be in the middle of that roll. And right here, for maybe 1 second, he presents his belly to the hammer. He's sideways. He can't turn, he can't climb, he can't return fire. His agility is gone. He's just a target. He looked up, meeting each of their eyes. The bait plane lures him into the trap. The hammer drops out of the sun and fills that exact spot with lead. It's not a dogfight. It's an ambush. We're not outflying them. We're outthinking them. He dropped the screwdriver. It landed with a soft thud in the dirt. We're the matchstick. We look weak. We look brittle. We look like we're about to be broken. But we're the thing that lights the fire. The silence in the lean-to was absolute, broken only by the rain. The pilot stared at the crude diagram in the dirt, the simplicity of it, the sheer, terrifying audacity. It went against every instinct of self-preservation they had. It required the bait pilot to have ice water in his veins, to stare death in the face and not flinch. Kowalski was the first to speak. He slowly got to his feet, his eyes locked on Sam. He walked over to the dirt diagram, studying it as if it were a complex blueprint. The cynical smirk was gone, replaced by a grim, calculating expression. He looked from the drawing to Sam, and back again. "Thatch," he said, his voice low and devoid of its usual bluster. "You're either a genius," he paused, letting the words hang in the humid air, "or you're gonna get us all killed." Before anyone could respond, a new sound ripped through the night, shredding the tension in the lean-to, a sound that turned their blood to ice. It was the air raid siren. Again. The shriek of the siren was a physical gut punch, jerking them from the theoretical world of dirt diagrams into visceral, immediate danger. There was no time for debate, no time for fear. Only action. Scramble! Scramble! All pilots to your aircraft. The voice over the field's loudspeaker was raw with urgency. They ran. The rain-slicked PSP grating was treacherous underfoot. Sam sprinted towards Dusty Times, his mind a whirlwind, the plan crystallizing under the pressure of imminent combat. He hauled himself into the cockpit, the familiar smells of leather, oil, and sweat filling his nostrils. The ground crew had already primed the engine. He went through the start sequence by rote, his hands moving with a speed born of drilled repetition. The Pratt & Whitney coughed once, twice, then caught with a thunderous roar that vibrated through his entire body. "Echo Flight, check in." Sam called over the radio, his voice tighter than he wanted. "Echo 3, up. Echo 4, running. Echo 5, good to go." A pause. Then, Kowalski's voice, grim and determined. "Echo 6. Let's light the match." They took off into the black, rain-lashed night, their landing lights cutting feeble cones through the downpour. They climbed through the cloud layer, a bump, chaotic ascent into a suddenly clear, star-dusted sky. The world below was a blanket of boiling gray, but up here it was cold and serene. The moon, nearly full, cast a silvery sheen on their wings. "Radar has them bearing 270, Angels 12, Control crackled in their ears. "Estimate 20 bandits." 20. Against 6. Sam's mouth went dry. He keyed his mic, "Echo Flight, form on me. Stack altitude. Kowalski, you're with me at level. Everyone else, climb to Angels 14. Remember the drill. Wait for my call. No one plays hammer until the bait is taken." They flew on, the only sound the drone of their engines. The tension was a wire stretched to its breaking point inside the cockpit. Sam forced himself to breathe, to slow his heart. He was the watchmaker. He had to be calm. He had to see the gear. Then they appeared. Dark shapes against the starfield, resolving into the unmistakable, predatory silhouettes of a 6M20s, climbing to meet them. "Here they come," Kowalski said, his voice a low whisper. "Hold course," Sam ordered, his own hands gripping the stick, fighting the instinct to break. "Steady. Steady." A Zero peeled off from the main formation, diving towards them. It was happening exactly as Sam had predicted. The enemy pilot saw two Wildcats flying straight and level, seemingly oblivious. An easy kill. Sam could feel the Zero pilot's eyes on him. He could see the aircraft growing larger in his mirror. Tracers flashed past his canopy, brilliant red in the darkness. A warning shot. A test. "Don't flinch, Kowalski," Sam transmitted, his voice eerily calm. "Who's flinching?" Kowalski shot back, but Sam could hear the strain. The Zero closed the distance with terrifying speed. It was now directly behind Sam, lining up for the killing burst. Every fiber of Sam's being screamed at him to dive, to jink, to do something. He held. He focused on a single star ahead of him, using it as a fixed point in the universe, a regulator to keep his own fear in check. "Now, Jabber," Sam said, his voice soft. "He's committed." He saw the Zero begin its roll. It was a thing of deadly beauty, a fluid, effortless motion meant to swing it onto a new attacking angle. For a breathtaking second, as Sam had foreseen, the Zero's pale underside was exposed, its wings perpendicular to the earth, its pilot a vulnerable silhouette in the cockpit. "Hammer, now. Now!" Sam yelled. From above and to the right, a Wildcat, Echo 4, screamed down out of the moonlit gloom. Its 6.50 calibers erupted in a single, sustained torrent of fire. Tracers converged on the sideways Zero. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The fragile Japanese fighter seemed to come apart in mid-air. The right wing sheared off entirely, spinning away into the darkness. The fuselage, riddled with incandescent holes, bloomed into a fireball that lit up the sky, illuminating the shocked faces of the other Japanese pilots for a split second before the wreckage tumbled toward the clouds below. It had worked. The radio was silent for a full 3 seconds, then exploded. "Holy Christ, it worked!" Echo 3 shouted. "Scratch 1-0," another voice cried. A fierce, savage hope surged through Sam. They had done it. They had broken the Zero's invincibility. But the victory was short-lived. The Japanese were not fools. They saw the trap. The loose, confident formation of Zeros tightened. They stopped making individual, aggressive attacks. Instead, 2 of them banked sharply, climbing not towards the bait, but towards the hammer, Echo 4, who was now vulnerable after his diving attack. Sam's plan had a flaw. It relied on the enemy's predictability. And the enemy had just changed the game. "Echo 4, break. You've got 2 on your tail," Kowalski yelled. It was too late. Sam watched in horror as the 2 Zeros, working in perfect, ruthless tandem, boxed in Echo 4. Tracers converged from 2 directions. The Wildcat's rugged airframe absorbed the hits for a moment, pieces flying off its wings and tail. Then a 20mm cannon shell found its mark. The center of the aircraft vanished in a brilliant orange flash. One moment it was there, the next, it was an expanding cloud of debris. The trap had been sprung. But the hunters had become the hunted. The brilliant flash that had been Echo 4 seared itself onto Sam's retinas, a phantom sun in the night sky. The hope that had surged moments before curdled into a cold, hard lump in his gut. The radio, which had erupted in triumphant shouts, went dead silent again, this time with the weight of horror. "My God, they got Peters," someone whispered over the channel, the voice hollow. The Japanese pilots, their initial shock gone, were adapting with terrifying speed. The loose hunting pack became a coordinated wolf pack. They no longer took the single, predictable bait. They moved in pairs, one engaging while its wingman hovered high, watching for the descending hammer, and pouncing on it the moment it committed. Chaos reclaimed the sky. Echo 3, "I can't shake him. I can't." The transmission was cut short by a burst of static. Sam caught a glimpse of another Wildcat, its wings sheathed in flame, spiraling down into the waiting cloud layer below. "They're swarming us," Kowalski yelled, his Wildcat jerking violently as he jinked to avoid a stream of cannon fire. "The plan's bust, Thatch. It's bust." Sam's mind raced, the watchmaker frantically trying to reassemble a shattered mechanism. The single matchstick wasn't enough. They needed a whole new fire. He scanned his gauges. Fuel was low. Ammunition was critical. And then a sound, new and horrifying, cut through the cockpit. A sharp, metallic bang followed by a high-pressure hiss. A fog of fine, acrid hydraulic fluid misted the air in front of him. The stick in his hand went sloppy, then heavy as a log. "I'm hit. Hydraulics are gone," Sam reported, his voice strained as he fought the deadening controls. The elevator and ailerons were still responding, but it was like trying to steer a truck through mud. The rudder was almost completely useless. Dusty Times was critically wounded, bleeding out its vital fluids into the sky. He was a sitting duck, a crippled bird in a sky full of hawks. He could no longer dive, could no longer maneuver with any real authority. The remaining Zeros sensed it. Like sharks drawn to blood, two of them broke from the general melee and began to circle him, taking their time, knowing the kill was inevitable. "Thatch, get out of there! Bail out!" Kowalski screamed, but Sam knew it was futile. He was too low, too slow. The canopy wouldn't jettison without hydraulics. He was trapped in the metal coffin of his plane. One of the Zeros, emboldened, moved in for the kill. It slid into position behind his tail, a perfect, textbook firing solution. Sam could see it in his mirror, a dark angel of death closing the distance. He pulled on the stick with all his might, the muscles in his arms screaming in protest. The Wildcat responded with a sluggish, groaning roll, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. This was it. The final tick of the clock. The worn tooth had finally shattered the entire gear train. But as he stared at the Zero lining up for its final victorious burst, the watchmaker's mind, even in its final, desperate moments, refused to stop calculating. The plan wasn't busted. It just needed to be bigger. Faster. A continuous circuit. With a surge of desperate energy, he keyed his mic, his voice cutting through the panic on the radio. "New plan. Rolling matchstick. It's the only way. Kowalski, you're the new bait. Now." "What?" Kowalski's reply was pure disbelief. "Don't stop. Don't ever stop. The moment one hammer strikes, the next one becomes the bait. We keep them moving, keep them guessing. It's a daisy chain. A circle of death. Do you understand? A rolling matchstick." There was a split second of silence, then Kowalski's voice, stripped of everything but a raw warrior's resolve. "I read you. Echo flight, on me. Let's make this damn wheel spin." Sam saw Kowalski's Wildcat streak past his canopy, deliberately drawing the attention of the Zero on his tail. It was a breathtaking act of courage. The Zero, distracted by the new, mobile target, broke off its attack on Sam. But it was too late for Sam. The second Zero, the one that had been hovering, had now seized its opportunity. With Sam crippled and isolated, it moved in. It didn't need a fancy roll. It didn't need speed. It simply slid into the killing position behind his mangled tail. Sam could see the cannons glowing as the pilot charged them. He was out of ideas. Out of altitude. Out of friends. He had one last, terrible card to play. A move that wasn't in any manual. A final, calculated act of pressure on a broken system. He took a deep breath, his father's face flashing in his mind. Time did not slow. It crystallized. In that final suspended moment, as the Zero's cannons began to wink with lethal light, the chaos of the world fell away. The scream of the wind, the frantic radio chatter, the hiss of his dying hydraulics, it all faded into a distant hum. Sam Thatch's mind became a silent, ordered room. He was no longer a pilot in a doomed aircraft. He was the watchmaker's son, staring at a broken movement, looking for the one, precise adjustment. He saw the problem. The Zero was committed. It was expecting a target that would try to flee, to jink, to fight the inevitable. It was prepared for panic. It was not prepared for surrender. Sam's hands moved, not with frantic force, but with the exact, calculated pressure his father had taught him. He didn't pull the stick. He didn't push the throttle. He did the opposite. He cut the engine. The thunderous roar of the Pratt & Whitney died instantly, leaving an eerie, whistling silence. He deployed the flaps manually, the strain immense, feeling them judder and lock into place. The Wildcat, already sluggish, shuddered violently as its airspeed bled away. It was a deliberate, controlled stall. A falling leaf. To the Japanese pilot, it must have looked like a final act of despair. A dead plane. A victory. The Zero, committed to its high-speed pass, overshot. It was a matter of physics, simple and unforgiving. One moment it was filling Sam's windscreen, a mere 50 yards behind him, its cannon shells about to tear his plane to pieces. The next, it was shooting past. So close Sam could see the startled turn of the pilot's head in the cockpit, the confusion as his target seemingly vanished from his sights. For one perfect, frozen second, the Zero was right there. Not in his mirror, but directly in front of his windscreen, its long, vulnerable fuselage and broad wings perfectly framed. It was no longer a predator. It was a target. The worn tooth had been exposed. Sam's world narrowed to the glowing pipper of his gun sight. He felt the weight of the trigger, a final, gritty resistance. He did not jerk. He applied steady, increasing pressure, the way he'd squeezed off 1,000 rounds at varmints in the Oklahoma dust. The 6 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns erupted for the last time. The sound was not a roar, but a singular, deafening burrap that shook the dying Wildcat to its bones. A solid stream of incandescent tracers and armor-piercing rounds lanced out, a fist of pure American steel. They struck the Zero just behind the cockpit, chewing through the thin skin of the fuselage, severing control cables, shredding the fuel lines leading to the engine. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a brilliant orange flower bloomed from the Zero's nose. The canopy vanished in a shower of plexiglass. The entire forward section of the aircraft disintegrated, and what was left of the enemy fighter cartwheeled once, twice, before spinning into the cloud deck below, a comet of fire and smoke. Silence. Sam's Wildcat, now a dead weight, began to fall. He had no power, no hydraulics, no altitude. He was going down. He fought the heavy stick, trying to nurse the dying beast into a glide, aiming for the black expanse of the sea. The clouds rushed up to meet him. He never felt the impact. Only a sudden, jarring deceleration, then darkness. He awoke to the smell of salt water, fuel, and his own blood. He was hanging upside down in his cockpit, suspended by his harness. Cold water swirled around his chest. Dusty Times was half submerged, its nose buried in the swell. He fumbled with the harness release, dropping into the water with a gasp. He inflated his life vest and paddled away from the sinking plane, watching as the sturdy Wildcat, the iron beast that had saved his life even as it died, gave a final gurgle and slipped beneath the dark waves. The dawn broke, pale and sickly, over an empty ocean. He was alone. He floated for what felt like an eternity, the events of the night replaying in his mind. The matchstick. The trap. The unraveling. The final tick. A sound made him turn. The low growl of a boat engine. A U.S. Navy PT boat, its silhouette sharp against the rising sun, was cutting through the water towards him. They had seen the fires in the sky, the falling wreckage. He was hauled aboard, wrapped in a coarse blanket, and given a cup of scalding coffee. He didn't speak. He just stared back at the sky. Back at Henderson Field, the mood was somber. Of the 6 Wildcats that had taken off, only 2 returned, Kowalski's and one other, both riddled with bullet holes. They had made it back on fumes, the rolling matchstick having allowed them to survive the final, brutal minutes of the fight. Kowalski found Sam in the infirmary tent, having his cuts bandaged. He stood there for a long moment, then simply extended a hand. Sam took it. Kowalski's grip was firm. His eyes held no mockery, no rivalry. Only a deep, hard-won respect. "We got 5 of them, Thatch," Kowalski said, his voice quiet. 5. With 6 Wildcats against 20. They're calling it a miracle. He paused. That last move, cutting your engine, that was the craziest, smartest damn thing I've ever heard of. Sam just nodded. He looked out at the airfield, at the mechanics already patching up the returning planes, at the new, fresh-faced pilots arriving to replace the ones lost. The war was a vast, chaotic clock, grinding on, consuming gears and springs with indiscriminate fury. But in that chaos, a new tactic had been born. A simple, brutal, effective tactic. The Thatch Weave, they would later call it. It would spread through the Navy, then the Army Air Forces, a doctrine born not from a manual, but from the mind of a watchmaker's son who saw a worn tooth in the enemy's invincibility. The most powerful weapon hadn't been the machine. It had been the mind inside it. The legacy of Sam Thatch wasn't the kills or the tactic, but the proof that even in the face of overwhelming force, a single calculated idea could change the balance. He thought of his father's quiet workshop, the smell of oil and metal, the ticking of 100 clocks. He had left that ordered world for one of screaming chaos. But in the end, he had brought a little bit of that order with him. He had found the single, precise point of pressure. And the clock, for a moment, had ticked in his favor. The stories of World War II are not just tales of machines and battles. They are testaments to the unbreakable human spirit, to the ingenuity that flourishes in the face of impossible odds. If this story of courage and a watchmaker's focus resonated with you, if you believe these lessons from history must never be forgotten, then do your part. Share this video. Let others see how one man's mind changed the sky. Subscribe for more untold stories of brilliance from the darkest hours. Lest we forget.